Hello and welcome to episode 37 of VR Roundtable. I am Steve and I am coming to you from Louisville, Kentucky. And as always, or as most of the time, I am joined by Gary, Anthony, and Chris will not be with us this week. We don't know where he is. Hopefully he's okay.
Gary, he might join us.
He might just pop in, yeah. So Gary, what's going on in your neck of the woods?
Not too much really. I'll get onto something in a moment, but I did I went to see the new Alien film this week, so I can sort of speak about that a little bit. I wasn't as impressed with it as I thought I would be, to be honest. I was really looking forward to it because I enjoyed Prometheus, but this one, it just lacked something, and I don't really know what it was. Maybe I need to watch it a few more times because I remember being a little bit underwhelmed with Prometheus the first time, but then after I'd seen it a couple of times, I got into it a bit more. The problem is with this Alien film, and I don't know if any of you guys have seen it yet or not, but it goes into, it takes the origins of the aliens in a slightly different direction to where you expect. I didn't expect them to go this route of where it does go, so that's something. But yeah, have any of you guys seen the new Alien film at all?
I have not.
No, but Gary, wait a minute. You liked Prometheus? Let's go back to that point.
Yeah, I did. But only I think part of that is because a few of friends who had seen it before me had said how it's awful. They really didn't like it at all. But I thought it was quite good. The thing is, the criticism around Prometheus seemed to stem from the fact that a lot of people knew it was an alien film and it didn't really have any aliens in it. In the traditional sense that we know about them. So I think a lot of people had problems with that. I didn't really have a problem with that. I was interested to see where the origins of the aliens came from. And this, again, I love the lore. I love the lore of the Alien films. And this is part of the reason why I was looking forward to this film, because I thought we'd get more of an insight into where they came from. I just didn't like where they took it, really.
You know what? I'll tell you about aliens. I don't care where the hell they came from. I just want to see them in an action-packed movie where they scare the living daylights out of me. Who cares about, oh, this is their origin story? Come on, they're freaking aliens.
No,
I disagree. I care. I get into that stuff because I like to sort of think about how it could be true. Like, you know, the universe is so flippin' big and basically incomprehensible as to what could really be out there. So anything that kind of intelligently has an origin or a lick of truth to it, I find that super interesting. So I love that stuff, Anthony.
Part of what I want to say about this, about the origin and why it interests me, is because they sort of allude so many times. You've got all these different, that the life cycle of the aliens is so complicated in those movies. And then they constantly adding in new elements into this life cycle. And you think, how does that fit into the alien that we knew from the original movie? And how does it all create this coherent narrative behind these aliens and where they came from? How do all these different moving parts fit into each other? That's really why I'm interested in it.
Yeah, I want to watch it. Like, you know, I don't go to the theater as often. So you guys have seen the new King Kong, didn't like it. I don't think you guys have talked about a movie that you actually liked yet since we've started VR Roundtable. But no, I'll be catching up on all these movies when it comes to Redbox/Netflix/ you know, can watch it in my home. That's one way I save money. So Anthony, I know you've been busy. What's going on in your world?
Yeah, well, last week I was in Lake Tahoe because my sister-in-law got married, and we all met up there. She actually had already gotten married, but it was kind of just a little ceremony and stuff and get together with everybody. And I don't know if you guys know anything about Lake Tahoe, but if you probably looked up like the 10 best vacation spots in California, Lake Tahoe would probably be on there. It's a really beautiful place. They have this golf tournament every year where like Michael Jordan and all the celebrities will be up there playing golf, and it's high elevation. And then you have this beautiful lake that is incredibly deep and super blue, incredibly cold water too. And you're right there on the border of California and Nevada. And so it's right, like half of the lake is in Nevada, half of it is in California. And you have all the casinos right there too. So the casinos aren't as important as they used to be with Indian gambling. It's almost like a an afterthought now, but it's a really cool resort town. So if you ever get a chance to get into Northern California and could stop by Lake Tahoe, I highly recommend it. But I've been really busy working on this thing called VR Game Rankings, and I wanted to tell you guys about it real quick. So basically, VR Game Rankings is this website, vrgamerankings.com. And the idea behind it, I really had two major thoughts with this, is that firstly, I kind of just want to celebrate like all the great VR games and experiences that we have on PlayStation VR, Oculus Rift, HTC Vive, and just kind of celebrate that. And then the other thing is I wanted to try to inject a little bit of a hype cycle into games that are coming soon. It's funny because when you think about regular gaming like Xbox One, PlayStation 4, Nintendo Switch, when you think about that area of gaming, there's too much hype. There's like way too much hype. Like people there are like, let's get rid of the hype because they've had too much hype. But in VR gaming, we don't have enough hype. And what I mean by that is, if I ask Steve right now, if I say, Steve, what is the big game coming in July to the HTC Vive? Can you tell me what the big game is coming in July?
No, it's because we don't. A lot of times we don't know. Like they just kind of pop up and are like, "Oh, releasing tomorrow is this game that you guys have been looking forward to."
Yeah. So, but what I'm saying is we don't have a real chance to kind of get excited about stuff that's coming up. We find out about it like days before it arrived. Boom, it just all of a sudden comes. And then it's like, okay, there's a little bit of hype for that day, but we don't get that pre-hype. And so what we have on VR Game Rankings is we have all kinds of rankings, top 20, top 50, top 100 of the various platforms, but we also have like a top 20 most wanted, the most wanted games that are coming in the next 3 to 6, 18 months or whatever. We have a top 50 most wanted. We have a top 20 for the Vive, Oculus, and PlayStation VR. And so you can go look at this and you can kind of see what some of the exciting stuff is that's coming down the pipe. And then also, if you disagree and you're like, this game isn't that great, why is this most wanted? You can submit your own top 20 list. But VR Game Rankings, of course, is about celebrating what we have right now as well. That's really the focus. It's, I think about it like the power rankings. Like if you've ever been on ESPN, they have power rankings for the top 32 NFL teams or the top 32 NBA teams or whatever. And they do these power rankings. And as the weeks go by, teams move up and down the list and stuff like that. Well, we're doing the same thing with VR games for PlayStation VR, for Vive, and Oculus. And the way it works is you can submit your top 20 of what's the best 20 Oculus games. You submit that, or Vive or whatever, and then your rankings that you submit, it goes into the pile of all the other rankings, and it's like a point system, and then how many times does it appear on other people's lists. And so that's all put together, and then it creates the new rankings. And when new big games come out, like Superhot just hit the Vive, or Farpoint just hit PlayStation VR, or Everspace hits the Vive and all that, these new games come out, and then a week later, people are throwing them in their rankings, and then they jump into the list. And so we're just kind of keeping track of all that. And then the other recommendation I have too is if you see somebody that just bought an Oculus Rift, or they just bought an HTC Vive or PlayStation VR, well, VR Game Rankings is a great suggestion for them to go check it out, because we have top 100, top 50, top 20, and you can get a really quick idea of what the truly best games are out there. And it's a work in progress. I'll be completely honest with that. We are at the very beginning of this, and I want to make the submission thing way the hell better than it is right now. But it's baby steps. I kind of launched it before it's really ready, but I just kind of want to get some awareness out there. But I will be working on this to the 12th degree. So I'm going to try to get it as good as possible. And one other thing too I will mention is if anybody out there wants to help a little bit, you can definitely help me. Contact me on Reddit. You can send me a private message, Anth916 on Reddit if you're interested, because we're trying to review every single VR game that's currently available, and then we're trying to have previews for all the big VR games coming. And I'm doing the best I can, but I haven't played everything. Gary's helped me out with some reviews. Steve's helped me out with a couple of reviews. So I'm having some extra people help me out because I don't have a staff that I've hired to do all of this. So doing the best I can, but I honestly recommend it. Check it out. Tell me what you think. And that's done with the plug.
Yeah. No, it's a very interesting idea, and how you compared it to like the NFL power rankings. I know that that's a thing people get into, and it in a way it really doesn't matter. Talking about the NFL power rankings, I'm a fan of the NFL, and every time a new ranking comes out, like I'll go through and read the short little synopsis that whomever did the rankings, said to kind of indicate it. And at the end of the day, it doesn't fully matter in the sense that it actually affects the product on the field, because it doesn't. Like the number one team can take a beating just like any of the others. But to know that this is how people feel about these teams, and the same thing applies to the VR games. And like you said, it's a very good resource, because it seems like every day on Reddit, multiple times a day on Reddit, and all the popular headset respective subreddits, there's always someone, I just got a PSVR. What do you guys recommend? I just got a this, I just got a that. And hopefully that becomes, one of the answers that people give. Just a little clarity. The VR game rankings is sort of Anthony's pet project. This is his idea, and it's not necessarily VR Roundtable, although Gary and I have helped him to varying degrees. And like he said, he's looking for additional help. So it is a separate thing, but because he's a part of VR Roundtable and we're all friends and we always are talking about VR, even when we're not doing the show, it'll be semi-related going forward, I'm sure.
Yeah,
so,
see, Steve, if I have a sexual harassment scandal, you don't want to be involved in it.
Exactly. So with that said, as we kick off this episode here, it's going to be a little bit different, and it's mainly driven by the fact that there wasn't a lot of news this week. There's a few little blurbs, and we're going to get into those. But a little bit later in the show, we may do some E3 predictions, and if we're going to sort of freestyle it, so to speak, and maybe just have some techno philosophy discussion on the industry as a whole, the headset. So it'll be a different episode. It'll deviate from our normal format, and that's really just because we don't have the news content to drive our normal format. So with that out of the way, getting into our first story, we have HTC announced that they have a new headset coming out, but oddly, and I don't understand any reason why, it's Japan only, and it is intentionally not linked to the Vive brand. It doesn't say Vive in any way, but this is the HTC Link. It is a 6 DOF headset. Looks a little bit like the PlayStation VR, and looks that it's not lighthouse type tracking, camera-based tracking. It's a very interesting product. The fact that they're doing this while also being involved with Google, and it being Japan only. So honestly, I can't make a lot of sense of it. But Gary, did you see about this, and do you see something that I don't see about the product?
No, I think, in all honesty, I think it's probably quite a good idea for a product, although I do take your point about how it can be a little bit strange that they've got this partnership with Google and creating this standalone Daydream headset, and now they're bringing this product out. And part of this is because, from some articles that I've read, it seems to be that two parts of the HTC company are maybe not communicating quite as effectively as maybe they should be. This could be a move purely on the mobile phone side of the company, and it's been developed completely independently from the Vive side of HTC, which appears to be the case. And part of the reason it might only be available in Japan is possibly because of this partnership with Google in these standalone headsets that they're developing with Google. But the headset overall, I think it's a good idea. I really do like the look of this. As you say, it seems to use a similar way of tracking to PlayStation VR. It's got the lights on top of the headset itself. And it also comes with 2 motion track controllers, which also have lights on, similar to the Move controllers on PlayStation VR. So if you can get some kind of positional tracking on mobile phone, then I think it's a good idea. And I really do wish we could get a product like this, depending on the price of it. If we could get a product like this over here in the UK or in the US, then that'd be great.
So as I understand this headset, it's unique in the sense that it's meant to work with their latest flagship phone. I don't know if this phone's out. I believe it's the U11 or U11. I can't really tell from the way it's listed here. I don't follow HTC's phones. So it's designed to work with that phone. However, unlike the Gear VR, the phone doesn't just snap into the headset, and the phone screen isn't the source of the display. It has its own internal display, yet it tethers to the phone, presumably through a USB cable or hell, maybe even some sort of wireless. Another interesting decision. Anthony, did you see this, and what do you think about all of it?
I have to say that I haven't actually read. I saw the headlines and stuff. What I thought happened is that I know that the HTC Vive has been demoed in Japan, where people could try like Brookhaven and stuff like that, and it would draw long lines of people. But then the problem that they would encounter is the people would then find out that they got to buy a PC, and PCs aren't very popular in Japan. And then the whole thing with the lighthouses and how much space you need. And in Japan, it's space is at a very, high premium, and then the PC market just isn't there. So I kind of see this as a way where it allows them to kind of market this stuff to Japan without requiring people get a PC and all that type of thing. But I'll be honest, I didn't really read this one because I don't know, a lot of these like little phone-based things, they don't excite me that much, to be totally honest.
Yeah. So again, it's an interesting sort of thing, and I don't fully get it, but we'll see where it goes. Our next story is a very short one, but it's a good one. And as I recently played and completed Farpoint, I think this is completely worthy. But Farpoint debuted at #2 on the UK game charts. Now, this is not #2 in VR titles only. This is #2 in all games. So I'm just going to run down the games for those that follow gaming as a whole. But the #1 game was Injustice 2, which I believe maybe had been its launch week, but I'm not entirely sure. Farpoint, of course, it was its launch week. And then we had longtime runner Grand Theft Auto 5, and then Prey, which is a relatively new game. Fire Emblem Echoes, Shadows of Valentia. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which is, I guess Deluxe is the Switch-only version of Mario Kart 8. Then we had FIFA 17, which I know over there in the UK, FIFA should be popular, but I don't know how long FIFA has been out. Ghost Recon Wildlands, which has been around for a while. Rocket League, which has been around for a whole long while. And then The Surge, and I'm not even sure what that one is. So it's a positive that this game debuted at #2, and it's a fantastic game, and I hope it gets all of the attention and hype that it deserves, and more importantly, what it does for the VR genre as a whole. But at the same time, it's not exactly a week in November where we have Call of Duties and all the major titles dropping, so it's not like it really displaced traditional gaming. So very interesting in that regards. Gary, what do you think of this?
Yeah, it is, as you say, it's just good to get a little bit more publicity on VR out there. It wasn't, as you say, it wasn't a huge gaming week this week in terms of big new releases or anything like that. But I think it just gets VR onto the top 10 gaming charts. So yeah, it's a good thing. Not a lot more I can add other than that.
Anthony, did you run out by Farpoint? It's the #2 game in VR, or #2 game overall, not just in VR. It must mean it's the #1 game in VR. Did you run out and buy it because of this?
No, I haven't. I'm torn about. Well, see, the thing is, I missed out on that incredible deal that you got, right? And then I was thinking, well, you know what? I'll just start up GameFly again, and I'll get it through GameFly, But then it's like, I don't have the controller, and then it's like, okay, well, should I buy the controller? but I think they want like $50 just for the controller by itself. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. So you know what I would really love is someone in Sacramento that has it. I just want to play the damn thing for like 4 or 5 hours just to check it out, kind of get a feel for it, and I'll get to it later. But I mean, I'd love to play it. I really would. And if I got that deal, I would have bought it. But the idea of paying like 80 or 90 or whatever it costs for the whole package now, if I just ran.
So you have Amazon Prime. Like I think the game here in the States, the combo is $80, I think, $79.99. And what they had done prior to the game coming out, the deal that you're referring to, they had a special where the game was the bundle was dropped to $60. And then if you're a Prime member, you get 20% off of that. So if you're a Prime member, that 20 should still apply. That 20% off should still apply for the first 2 weeks since the game came out. So it'd be 20% off of 80, whatever that works out to be. So it'd be like $62. So if you have thoughts, you have like just a couple days to act on it. But that might be the best way to get the aim controller and the game, because separately they're just way too expensive. But also, I know there was availability issues with Farpoint bundle on Amazon. It may not be on there. I know there were stock issues. So even if you wanted to do it, you may not be able to. But it's worth looking into.
A lot of places have been sold out. I think Best Buy was sold out for a little while. It's a good sign that it's selling out and that it's, you know, they're selling out of their stock. But to go back to the actual story of it appearing on that regular list with regular everyday games, honestly, unless I'm mistaken, this might be the first time that we've seen this, really, right? So, that's pretty freaking cool, you know?
Yeah, that's why I think this was pointed out a lot in the community, because it's not something that I'm aware of, like you. Like, I'm not aware of this happening before. So that is really good.
I mean, the hope eventually is this would be a complete non-story, but, you know, eventually when VR, you know, it'll be a commonplace thing. VR games will just be littered in with everything else, but we're not quite there yet.
Yep. So I think that wraps it up. Now, Anthony, before we started recording, you were talking about the Samsung news with the new display technology they released. You want to talk about that?
Yeah. So here's the thing. I was trying to find where I saw this and I couldn't, because it's not on some of the normal websites, but I did see a story. Well, there was the story before that we were going to find out about these screens, these super high resolution screens, and it's going to be part of this next wave of VR technology. And so everybody got excited about it, and it was supposed to be released on this day or whatever. And then nothing happened. No one ever really heard anything about it. And then like a day later, the information did come out. And it's kind of sketchy, but the main takeaway that I have from the whole thing is basically Samsung was showing off a number of different screen technologies. And some of them were these bendable screens that could curve and they could fold it a certain degree. And then they were also showing off these specialized screens for the VR, or at least talking about the specs and stuff like that. But what happened is some of the Samsung representatives that were there, that were being questioned about various things about it, they basically were saying, this is not for any VR headset that's coming anytime soon. This is like a future thing. And see, that was, hearing those quotes really was like being stabbed with a knife for me, because I was so excited. I truly thought that Samsung had this incredible HMD that was going to come in early 2018, and it was going to feature these screens. But all the comments that they made at this little unveiling, all of them seemed to suggest that it's a lot farther away than that, like maybe 2019. So my whole dream of early 2018 just kind of went down the tubes as far as I could see.
Okay. Yeah. So I saw the articles that talked about the expected announcement, but I didn't see the actual announcement. So based on what I saw in the expected announcement, the higher res and the very high PPI is really, I guess honestly, there's not a lot to say, because it's something we've all been asking for. It's something that I want. Screen door is an issue, and you know, the first question that gets asked when you talk about raising the PPI of a display is, well, how are we going to drive it? You know, PCs can't even keep up today. You know, it can barely keep up today and drive these games. How are they going to drive something that's 4 times the resolution? And my answer is they don't necessarily need to. You know, like eliminating screen door, and it will have its improvement there, even if you're running at the same resolution. And for some of the really simple cartoony type games where the fidelity, you know, the assets may not be so taxing, you can run them native and they'll probably look badass, like, you know, Lucky's Tale or something at full, you know, 4K per eye resolution. I imagine that looks incredible. So I say bring it. I'm a fan of it. It needs to happen. And, you know, it's kind of the cart before the horse, or the chicken before the egg. Like it needs to occur and to drive a lot of the developers to make content that suits it, you know. So Gary, what do you think?
Yeah, well, just while you guys were talking just then, I've just tried to find an article about this, because I remember seeing something, like you say, Steve, there was an article about an expected announcement from this. And I've just found something here about this 3.5-inch, 120 hertz OLED display, which has been specifically designed for VR. And this is from a news story posted 5 days ago. So this must be the same one that they were talking about. And it comes with a 858 PPI. Do any of you guys know offhand the PPI of a standard Vive or Rift? I'm not 100% sure, but this is supersedes it either way.
Yeah. God, I want to say in the 500, but maybe I'm thinking that's maybe one of the nicer smartphones on the market. Yeah, I came. This is a significant improvement. Like it's not just a minor. This is a major improvement in pixels per inch and total density.
Yeah, it's the pixels per inch, but also the refresh rates as well. So it's got 120 hertz refresh rate, which is something else. Do you guys remember a few months ago where Gabe Newell was giving this sort of mini conference to some industry press, and he was talking about how they're already moving on to these things like these 240 hertz displays, ultra high resolution, and all these kinds of things that will be coming out at some point in the future. So this is a step in that direction, I guess. And yeah, as you say, Steve, this is something that we all want. We all want better resolution, and you know, maybe the high refresh rate. I haven't really got anything to compare it to, if I'm being honest, but I know that the refresh rate is going to improve the overall experience, and I'd love to try something that was going up to like the 120 hertz. I know that on the PSVR that has a 120 hertz display, but oftentimes it's actually running a game which is running at half that frame rate, so it's having to sort of, I don't know what is it interpolate or something like that? The
interpolate, yeah. It's basically sort of a reprojection in that sense, and you can see it. So one of the best cases I had of that was playing rigs, and at the end of a rigs match, you would sort of see your mech, and it would be like a tabletop sort of trophy, and you could turn your head and kind of pan around it, and you could see the reprojection effects. You know, it's like PlayStation needs Oculus's space warp to make that go away. And I see that at times on the PlayStation VR. I saw a little bit in Farpoint, but they do a pretty good job of masking it out. Now, I have not played, even though I have a PSVR and it is 120 hertz, I have not knowingly played a game that was 120 hertz. I may have, like, I have memories of Darknet. Darknet, it was a simple game visually, but it did something that made me feel like it was ink on a paper. Like it was just so fluid. And that game, it's simple enough. I wouldn't be surprised if it was running at 120 hertz, but I don't knowingly for any sort of absolute terms that it was running at 120. So I can't say I've tried a game at 120 hertz, but I think I might have. And if that's the case, it was pretty good in that sense.
Hey, can I ask you guys a question? Okay, so the you know how I was like dreaming of this Samsung headset in early 2018, this new dream, incredibly high resolution. I mean, we remember what Gabe was talking about. There's going to be these higher resolution headsets. We had that one developer that was like, I just tried a headset today that was 4K and it's incredible. You remember that? I mean, you guys remember that. So my question is, I'll kick it to Gary first. Gary, did you think anything was coming? Like, was there anything on the horizon like this Samsung that you thought, I mean, or did you think this Samsung was coming? And is there any disappointment in knowing that it's probably a lot farther away, that this is not in the near term at all?
Sort of, yeah. I mean, I can see your point, and we all want the experience to get better and better as soon as possible. But I've got to say, when I think about this quite often, about how these companies that are bringing these headsets out, you've got HTC and Vive, Oculus and the Rift, and until they get some realistic competitors within the market, I honestly don't think that they need to do anything yet. I mean, obviously they're developing their next generation of headsets, but at the same time, we say this again and again, you know, it's content. We need content rather than these high resolutions at the minute. And as much as I want a better display, and it's almost a little bit frustrating to say we need content, which is true, we do. But at the same time, I just feel like there's no need for these companies to really give us anything than they've already given us now, because there's nothing else to compare it to that's any better at the moment. Now that's going to change. You know, even with what's been announced already, we've got the LG headset, which is a lighthouse based system which is coming out that has a slightly higher resolution than the Vive. And even in terms of that, they are saying that people that have used it are saying that it's really not that much of a difference from the Vive, even that slight increase in resolution. So I'm not really tempted by that. But to get back to your original point, to say, am I disappointed that these displays are a lot further in the future? A little bit, but in all honesty, I think I've got the patience to wait if we're getting some decent content in the meantime.
So, you know, my take is I'm a little bit, you know, I guess I'm in between you guys in that sense. Like I can be more patient. But at the same time, I almost wonder if it's a function of Samsung looking at the market and putting the brakes on it a little bit and saying, okay, you know, all this hype, 2016 was the year of the hype. And as 2016 tailed off and we're almost halfway through 2017, you know, let's slow our roll a little bit. We're not abandoning it in any way. It's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's, you know, just being a little more conservative. I get it if that's their business thing. And then also, let's not forget, very important point, ZeniMax did say that they're steering their attention from Oculus towards Samsung. That may have just spooked Samsung completely, because, you know, they took on Apple. I don't know if they can take on ZeniMax in a courtroom. I'm joking.
Let's not forget as well, just to go back to a point, that there is this thing that people have said in the past, like in terms of smartphones, there's like an artificial limitation on companies that companies put on the technology that they release in order to bring out various iterations in order to make more money. So there could be a little bit of that in VR as well. You know, they could have this technology ready to go, and even if it's sort of at a reasonable price, they could have it ready to go, but they're holding back because they want to prolong this generation as long as they can, just so that they can bring out the next one, and then the next one's already prepared, you know, and on and on. So there could be a little bit of that as well, I suppose.
No, yeah, definitely. They have to look at the year-over-year growth, and they have to do it year over year over year. So there very well could be a plan there, and that would make total sense. So if we're done with the Samsung story, then really that's all we had for news. Unless I'm missing something. Do you guys have anything else?
No, but we might want to just mention that there has been the release of some big games that have hit different platforms. Like we just got Super Hot on the Vive, and the initial reaction seemed to be a little bit subdued, because some people were saying this actually works better on Revive than it does natively on the Vive. But I think they patched it recently, so hopefully that patch helped. And then the other one is Star Trek Bridge Crew. We're doing this show on Sunday, and I think the game launched a little early. Isn't it supposed to come out on like the it's available. You can get it right now, I think. Star Trek Bridge Crew.
Can you buy it like at like on Steam and Oculus right now?
I think
I don't know about Oculus, but I think it's available somewhere. Like people are getting their hands on it.
From what I've read, it's available on PSVR and possibly the Oculus Home, but it's not available on Steam yet. As far as I know, I've not actually checked.
So I have it in my GameFly queue, and I thought the game didn't come out till Tuesday. So hopefully they send it my way, and I can give it a check. It's one of those games where, I'm not a big Trekkie. I don't speak Klingon or whatever it is, and I loosely know about Captain and Spock, and so I think it's a very interesting concept of a game, but I'm not a fan enough to run out and buy it. So hopefully I get to get a crack at it through GameFly, and we'll see where that goes. Okay, Anthony, any other titles you wanted to talk about that were about to come out soon or recently announced?
No, I think that pretty much covers it, basically.
Okay. So one of the next things we want to do, and I'll turn it over to Gary first, E3 VR predictions. What's going to happen? Get out your crystal ball.
Well, yeah, we're going to go through some of these, because what we'll do is we'll go through some of the conferences on E3. We're wanting to get into E3 predictions now on this show because, as we get close to E3, there are leaks and all of these kinds of news stories start coming out the closer we get. So we wanted to just give some of our thoughts of what we might possibly expect, or at least hope for, on this year's E3 from some of the big companies. And the ones we're going to focus on is Bethesda, Sony, and Microsoft, as these are probably the most relevant to VR, at least as far as we know. So we'll go through Bethesda first. On this one, last year Bethesda announced Fallout 4 VR. This is a title which is probably on the top of most people's anticipated VR title list at the moment. And they spoke about this last year, and they were saying how they're going to bring the full Fallout 4 VR game to virtual reality. And they specifically mentioned the HTC Vive, but presumably that will mean it will be compatible with the Oculus Rift as well. And they also spoke about Doom VR, which was a little demo they had going on at last year's E3, but they haven't formally announced a full Doom VR game. Now, I'll just go first on this. Perhaps that could be something we see this year, depending on how well they've got on with Fallout 4, and hopefully we'll get some kind of a release date on that game. Doom VR, for me, would probably be the next title that we might hear from Bethesda. Anthony, have you got any thoughts on Bethesda and what you hope for announcement-wise this year?
Yeah, I can tell you this, that the moment Todd Howard walks out on stage, that's the moment I'm waiting for this whole entire E3, which I don't know if it's Sunday, June 11th. I haven't looked at the calendar, but I know that Bethesda's conference is Sunday, and I believe it's 7 p.m. Pacific, so they kind of go nighttime-ish. And that's the big one, man. Talk about VR game rankings. Our number one most wanted game, Fallout 4, period. On the overall rankings, it's number one, and there isn't anything close to it because, like you said, it was announced at the last E3. Some people got some demos of it. The demos were a little bit lukewarm because they didn't know, teleportation, what kind of, so they were just very beginning stages of it, and it was a real limited demo that people got. But this time, what I fully expect to have happen is, number one, we're going to get the date. Number two, and my prediction for the date is late September. I don't know why. Late September is my prediction. As for at the show, there's going to be demo. Like, one of the things he's going to announce is right after the show, we have 10 demo stations lined up. Everybody try Fallout 4 VR. I think this is going to be the thing of the show, and this really is the moment that VR has waited for, because here's what I want to have happen. Jeff Gerstmann and all the people in gaming that are kind of like that they're not in love with VR right now. I want them to try something like this and be like, holy shit, the game has changed. It's over. VR is going to kill it. That's what I want. Eventually, these people are going to have a nice fat serving of crow, and I don't know if it's going to happen on June 11th, but that's what I'm hoping for. So I can't be more excited for that.
Well, just talking about Jeff Gerstmann there, because one of his quotes from a recent podcast on the Giant Bomb podcast, they were saying how Jeff Gerstmann and Brad, actually, they were both talking about how Fallout 4 to them couldn't be less appealing. And I think they were specifically talking about how they don't want to spend that long in a big, huge game like that, in an open world game within VR. But I think a lot of VR fans are the absolute opposite of that. But Steve, what did you think of this?
So I kind of, it's bittersweet. So on one hand, I think we can pretty much bank on Fallout 4 VR details coming out, almost to the point I'm sure we're going to get a release date. I'd be very surprised if we didn't. On a minor note, I'd say we can't quite bank on it. I wouldn't bet any money, but I think we're going to get more info on Doom. And on a long shot, if I give 3, a long shot is they may even talk about another game that they're working on. They seem to be, compared to most major developers, they seem to be more on the VR train. So I wouldn't be surprised if they had something else in the queue that they were maybe ready to announce. Not show, but announce. But even then, I think that's a long shot. More specifically about Fallout 4 and how the community, the larger gaming community, would respond to it, I don't think it's going to be the magic sauce, even if the game itself is magic sauce. I think the naysayers are the naysayers, not for objective, rational reasoning. They are the naysayers for other reasons. And Fallout 4 VR being a big deal, there's one critical point of that, and that is, well, the best thing you have in VR is a game that is 3 years old, or however old Fallout 4 is. Like, that's it. Like, it's the best thing you got going is a port of a 3-year-old game. Doesn't matter how magical the experience is, right? This is not about being true. This is not the scientific method. This is sort of a game of politics where it's about persuasion and misdirection. And the naysayers, I think, are going to continue to be naysayers after Fallout 4. That said, that's more of the sort of the media types. I think a lot of people who just want to have fun playing games, I think they may try Fallout 4 and be like, holy shit, this is awesome, and then go out and buy some VR hardware. So I think it'll be good for VR. The game is going to be good for VR, no question. But I don't think
Steve, so basically, you think that there's a certain type of person that is going to have to be dragged kicking and screaming to finally admit that VR has a future. There's just certain people that.
And I think it's going to take a new game. I think it's going to take a new IP. Well, maybe not a new IP altogether, but it's going to take a game that they can't do elsewhere. I mean, Resident Evil 7 came, and it has its faults and a lot of critiques in VR, but that wasn't enough to sway them. Like, a lot of them, like, oh yeah, it's kind of cool, but then I finished it on my 50-inch TV. So that was a game that came in VR at the same time. Fallout 4 is going to be a game, even if it's more immersive, is going to be a 3-year-old game, or however old it is. I'm not sure how old it is because I never played it. And I think that's going to be, for those that want to be critical and that need to be pulled kicking and screaming, I think Fallout 4 is actually going to give them ammunition to shoot at VR, because it's just a port of an old game they've all played.
Depending on how well Fallout 4 VR goes down, perhaps the game that, if they say, it went down really well and we sold a lot of copies of Fallout 4 VR, who knows, maybe the next Elder Scrolls game will be VR compatible. And even if it's not, it seems to me that a lot of people would suggest, perhaps if not Doom VR, then maybe Skyrim VR would be the next logical step for Bethesda to do, because it's an older game that can probably transition a small team to begin working on the VR version of it. But who knows, if Fallout 4 VR does take off and becomes this big hit, then they might start implementing it in the next Elder Scrolls game. Okay, the next conference that we'll concentrate on here is the Sony. Sony are next, or Microsoft. I think Microsoft are before Sony, aren't they? So we'll go to them first. We'll do this in chronological order. But with
Microsoft actually goes before Bethesda, technically.
Oh, do they? Okay. Well, forget it then. This has all gone to pot, hasn't it? But we'll go with Microsoft. The Scorpio was announced last year at E3, and during that presentation of the Scorpio, they did focus quite a lot, actually, more than I think anybody would have expected had we known they were going to announce something beforehand, that they would have focused on VR to this extent that they did in that presentation. So they did say that, it would be high fidelity VR, whatever that means. And I guess it's sort of a little bit of a dig against PlayStation VR, because they know that system might be slightly underpowered powered compared to the PC VR platforms. So maybe they were talking about that. But anyway, since then, Microsoft seemed to have sort of taken a step back in some ways from associating the new Scorpio console with virtual reality. So hopefully we'll hear something from E3. I mean, in terms of predictions, I really don't know what to predict with this. I don't know which way to go. I don't know whether we could say that they'll announce some kind of partnership with HTC or with Oculus in order to say that these are the headsets that are going to be compatible out of the box with the Scorpio, or whether they're going to announce that their own, the third-party Microsoft headsets, which are coming from Asus and the like, will be compatible with the Scorpio. I don't know. I'm not too sure what to go with this prediction, but Steve, what did you think?
Of the three, I think this is the hardest one to pin down, because all along Microsoft has not been very clear in their VR message. And from a business perspective, I understand why they haven't been as clear, because they're kind of sitting back. They want to see where this market goes too. They didn't fall for the hype, and maybe good on them for that. Many episodes ago, Anthony and I had a little back and forth on what we thought Microsoft was going to do. So I think we stand a good chance, maybe a 50-50 chance of one of us eating crow on the episode after E3, because basically, like, I think they have to acknowledge the elephant in the room. I would be very surprised if Microsoft got on stage and the letters V and R together were not uttered. I would be really surprised. That said, it doesn't mean they're really going to announce really hardly much. I do think Scorpio is going to be the focus of their presentation, and I think for traditional gaming, I think that's going to hog 99% of what they have to show. So I think if they announce VR, I think it'll be just enough to sort of wet the palate. So it's that one's real hard to pin down, but if I have to put a guess on it, okay, so the first layer is whether or not they even announce anything VR related. So let's assume they do. Then my next guess is they will announce a headset, an Xbox branded headset. I'm sticking to my guns from months ago. An Xbox branded headset that may be a rebadged Asus, Acer, Lenovo, whatever, or maybe something developed entirely elsewhere. Not sure, don't care. But I think if VR comes to Scorpio, that it's going to be an Xbox brand. So Anthony, go ahead and argue with me, and one of us is don't eat lunch because one of us is eating crow.
Yeah, so man, Microsoft, this is the hardest one to predict. It could be anything. Now, what I really think is going to happen is I don't think they're going to spend a lot of time on VR. And Steve, to your point that VR will appear somewhere on there, maybe not, because they love saying mixed reality. They don't ever even mention VR for whatever.
Okay. My point though, they're going to refer to that thing.
But I kind of feel like it's going to be a subdued VR unveiling. But here's the facts though. The Acer headset with those two controllers is bundled for $399.99. Now, this is really important because let's look at their primary competition right now. Their primary competition is PlayStation with PSVR. That's the exact price of PSVR. But then Microsoft has to know this as well. If you guys, well, actually, let me back up a quick second. Because if we go back to GDC and back when Phil Spencer was on IGN Podcast Unlocked, there were, and then also some comments that Alex Kipman made as well. Every indication was that Scorpio VR, you're not getting no Scorpio VR this year. So first off, understand that. No one's playing Scorpio VR this year. So understand that. Number two, you're probably not getting Scorpio VR until November 2018 or September 20. It ain't going to be in early 2018 either, unless Phil Spencer and Alex Kipman were talking out of their, because his whole thing was VR has to incubate on Windows and it's going to take a while and blah, blah, blah. So they set the stage. This is a late 2018 thing. But when we think about E3 conferences, oftentimes companies will show something way ahead of time because they kind of want to plant the seed. Like, remember Connect and stuff like that. Like, sometimes you hear about it like a year ahead and then it finally comes out. Now, my prediction is you might see that they have a package deal, headset, controllers, $399 coming in. They might just say coming in 2018 because they don't want to actually reveal that it's really November and it's like forever away. But you might get that. They might have that price out there so that people know that Scorpio is going to have enhanced VR games, because, well, actually, this is the only exclusive Scorpio games they can have. There's no VR coming to Xbox One, so this is a chance for them to have exclusive content coming to the Scorpio, so that's going to be huge. And then guess what? 343 Industries, they're going to have a little something at E3, and what it's going to be is a small little VR demo, a tiny little VR demo. There's going to be a little Halo VR demo. That is my prediction. Similar to how HoloLens, like a number of years ago, they did HoloLens at E3 and they showed people Minecraft. And then they also had this Halo thing where you can kind of look at it was like a boardroom in Halo, you know, with like the screens, like augmented reality screens popping up, and you could do a little HoloLens preview thing that was short, and you kind of walk through this area and you see it. It's going to be something like that, a small kind of a demo to give people a taste. But VR is going to be a buried story for them. It's not going to be the main story, but they are going to have a little bit of juice. That's my prediction.
Okay. And the final conference that we'll mention on our predictions is obviously the Sony one. Now, for me, this is going to be a very interesting conference because PSVR needs some big titles. Now, what I'm predicting on this one is that, well, first of all, if they do announce a big title, first of all, it's going to be at least a year away, possibly even longer than that. But what I'm predicting more than that is possibly some more of things that we've seen before in the past. And this isn't a prediction that I really want to happen, but it's the prediction I think is most likely, is that they're going to have some short VR levels associated with some of their big first party titles that are coming out in the coming months. And, you know, there was a few rumors about Battlefront 2 a few weeks ago, and I think obviously that's a no-brainer more or less. I think we will get some kind of Battlefront 2 trailer, and they may even announce something VR-wise alongside with that. I don't think we'll see the full game in VR or anything like that, but hopefully a slightly longer experience than the one that was released with the last Battlefront game. You know, just a single level. Hopefully we'll get something a little bit more substantial than that. But that's really what I'm predicting. I'm predicting some of the big titles will probably have a couple of levels, 2 or 3 levels that can be played in VR, really. I know it's probably a pretty safe bet, but if we do get any big titles, and actually what I am hoping for is that they will really push VR heavily this E3, and they will say, we've got some big VR titles coming out. They'll just give some teaser trailers and they won't be around for another year, 18 months, something like that. Steve, what do you think?
Pretty much what you think. I don't think they're gonna, you know, a lot of Sony pressers have been like, okay, well, here's the segment of the show that we're going to talk about Vita, and they'll talk about a bunch of Vita stuff, and then here's the segment we're going to talk about PlayStation Phone, back when they had those Ericsson things, and then now we're going to talk about PlayStation, the PS3, PS4, or whatever. I don't think they're going to do that with VR. I don't think there's going to be a VR section, so to speak. And they may come out in the beginning, well, PlayStation 4 has sold 30 million consoles, whatever, and PlayStation VR has sold 1 million. I think they may do that, but I think VR is going to be present throughout the whole show, because exactly as you say, I think they're going to go, oh, here's announcing new DLC for Horizon Zero Dawn. Oh, but wait, one of these levels is going to be playable in VR. I'm not saying they'll do that with Horizon Zero Dawn specifically, but I think a lot of their main titles, they're going to they're going to associate these sort of plugins, A, because we've seen them do it before, and B, I think it's a sort of a successful approach because it allows each and every one of these developing studios to get their leg and dip their toe into VR development without, you know, having to be so pot committed with a full title. So I think that's almost a lock. It's pretty much as big of a lock as more details on Fallout 4 that's going to happen. I do think Sony will announce some big titles to keep people yearning and interested. Sony Santa Monica, there's been rumors kicking around the last week or so that they're announcing possibly something big for VR, which makes everyone immediately go to God of War. And, you know, we have an up and coming God of War, you know, traditional pancake game coming out soon this year, maybe. I don't know. I quit paying attention. But, you know, maybe there's something going on there. Maybe they may pull something sneaky. I think it's probably a long shot, but they may pull something and say, hey, this is a playable in VR. Also, I believe there was a early on PlayStation VR demo that was God of War. So I think that's fueling some of those rumors. So really, that's the crux of Sony's. I think Sony's is probably the most important in the sense that we'll hopefully get a feeling of where they stand on VR now after having their headset out for 9 months or however long it'll be, and, you know, where their investment going forward is. And then also we got a lot of games that we know about, you know, relatively minor games like Golem and the Dino Frontier. I think we'll start getting some release dates on those at the show. Maybe not in the presser, so to speak, but at the booths and things. You know, we'll start getting articles saying, "Oh, Golem is coming out in September," and things like that. So I'm very interested in the Sony one because I think we want to know where they stand, because there's been a lot of doom and gloom, you know, a lot of, well, is Sony going to support this like they support the Vita, which ironically was a well-supported system. There were so many games that came out for the Vita and still are coming out. It's kind of an ironic statement, but anyway, so I think Sony's important.
Pancake game. Where did you come up with that one? It's a good idea. Good phrase.
I heard it somewhere. Yeah.
But yeah, I think you're right, and I do think that as well, to prevent people losing faith in PSVR at this time, they do need to announce. I think it'd be great for them to announce something big, just to, even if it's a long way in the distance, as I say, just to keep people enticed and know that they are supporting this. And Anthony,
one thing before we go to Anthony, and I meant to say this but lost track of it. I would not be surprised. I'm not going to say it's happening. I have no insider info, and I'll be as equally surprised if it doesn't happen. So 50-50, if you want to call it this. I would not be shocked if Battlefront 2 comes out with aim support. Would not surprise me in the least. Sony has a good relationship with DICE there making that game. The aim controller is fantastic. It has every button. They could completely duplicate that game, and Battlefront, a very, very low res version of it, could be fully playable on PlayStation VR. It could happen if they make it happen.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Anthony, go ahead.
Yeah, so first thing I just want to say, pancake game. That is absolutely freaking hilarious. I have to use that. I am going to steal that. That is just hilarious. But yeah, so the Sony thing is super interesting because, like Steve was saying, I mean, I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but we remember back to the days of kind of this wallowing situation with PlayStation VR before we heard about, you know, that sales in the first quarter had picked up and all these different things. That people were kind of wondering, is Sony going to just back away from this whole thing? I mean, there was some doom and gloom stuff out there. And as somebody that loves VR, and I don't want to see that happen, even I would have to be honest and say that there was a little bit of concern, man, because Sony really wasn't saying anything. It was kind of, you know, there was some fuel out there for the haters, basically. But that's what we're going to see with this E3, because if Sony comes out and they show off just a couple of little things and hardly say anything at all, then we might have some legitimate concern out there. But based on everything we're seeing, based on that Nielsen report of how there's such an interest in PlayStation VR and all of these kinds of things, I think Sony is going to double down. So I think they're going to come out with guns blazing. if you look at the releases for PlayStation VR, we had, of course, Resident Evil 7 was the big one in late January, and then we just got Farpoint. Now, in between Resident Evil 7 and Farpoint, there wasn't a hell of a lot going on. And then from this point right here with Farpoint to whatever next big one they got, again, not a hell of a lot going on. So I really believe that they need one big one. They got to have one big game, and it's got to be this November. So I think they need something on the level of Farpoint and Resident Evil 7, something in the same kind of thing. Now, Battlefront, obviously they're going to have a deal there. We already have that on VRGameRankings.com. It's the number 3 most wanted PlayStation VR game, Star Wars Battlefront 2. And it's because everybody and their mom knows that there's going to be an experience there. And what I think is going to happen is, instead of being like a 20-minute experience that we got with the Rogue One X-Wing mission, I think this is going to be more like a 2 or 3 hour experience. So I think it's going to be quite a bit more in depth. But one thing I will say is, we talk about how PSVR doesn't have that much stuff going on, but I'm looking at VR Game Rankings right now, this top 20 most wanted for PSVR, and there is some stuff that is floating out there. For example, The Persistence. This is a big game coming from Firesprite. It's got this horror look. It looks pretty cool. You got Gran Turismo Sport still coming this year that should have some VR. Well, not necessarily coming this year. We know Polyphony Digital likes to delay stuff like crazy, but that could come later this year. Project Cars 2, of course, is coming to everybody, but that's coming to PSVR. Golem, as was mentioned. Arizona Sunshine. Arizona Sunshine is about to come out really soon. I think maybe in, we have it listed as June 2017. Arizona Sunshine's probably going to work with the AIM controller as well. What's going to be... Okay, what's going to be interesting about Arizona Sunshine is that's a game that requires some pretty strong power on the computer. Like, if you have a really low-end graphics card, you might have some problems with that game. So I'm really curious to see how that's going to work. There's a rumor that Paranormal Activity is coming to PSVR, which is kind of unusual considering that thing doesn't even run on a 970 on an HTC Vive. Megaton Rainfall by Pentadimensional Games, that superhero game. We'll probably see a blowout of that. Dino Frontier. Dreams. What about Dreams? Media Molecule. Okay, so Media Molecule has been working on Dreams for like 4 or 5 years. It's this albatross that is on Sony's back. Like, is that going to pay off for them? Is this investment
even been confirmed to be a VR title?
No.
It has not, but a lot of people are sort of expecting it. In a similar way, Battlefront 2 hasn't been confirmed to have any kind of VR content at all. It's sort of the expectancy. And this is really, Media Molecule. They're like Crytek at this point with this game. Like, if they don't make this successful, I think they're closing doors.
Yeah. I mean, like you say, it's been 4 years, is it 3 or 4 years, something like that, when it was first shown off. And yeah, I mean, it's baffling to me because it doesn't seem like it's I mean, they must have something big planned for it, because from what I've seen of it, it seems like quite a basic game, but it must have a lot more depth than what they've shown off so far.
Yeah, I mean, if they can pull it off for VR, and actually I wouldn't be surprised if it finally got announced and really shown in a deeper way. If they can pull it off for VR, it'll be like this. It'll be very, very unique in, using, thinking of like Tilt Brush and Quill and Medium. You create something, but then you can share it. I could create something and, hey, Gary, check this out. Like, I think that'll be a big deal for VR, even though I personally was never a big fan of Little Big Planet that much. I appreciated for what it did, and I thought it was very unique and a great idea. I never had time to build levels, but a lot of people do, and I think, I'm rambling, but I think that would be a good get for the system.
Spider-Man from Insomniac. We could get an announcement that they're also working on a little VR thing. That would be huge. And then there's also the possibility that we could get some older games that could get converted to VR. What about No Man's Sky? Gary talks about how much stick that game takes, but what if it had a VR mode? That might be interested. But they'll probably just let that one lie. But there's stuff like that. And then the other thing too is one prediction I'll make: Wipeout in VR, because you know how there's this Wipeout collection that's about to come out for regular PS4. It's like all this Wipeout stuff that has been re-enhanced for like way better resolution and all the PlayStation 3 stuff. And everybody was like, oh man, no VR, this is bullshit, you know. But it's possible they have a special Wipeout VR game that is planned that's been, you know, kept hidden all this time. They have to have some stuff that they've been working on that is completely secret. And one of these things might be ready this November, and it might be a really big game. So the PlayStation VR conference is going to be super interesting.
Yeah, it really is.
I mean, not the conference, but the PlayStation conference.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's pretty much all the major conferences we wanted to talk about on this little section. Let's move on to the next thing. Anthony, I think you suggested this one. Did you want to just talk about the next topic that we've got about the accessories?
Yeah, well, I mean, see, this particular episode, we were really light on news stories, so we were trying to think of other things that we could possibly talk about. And this is something that we see on Reddit all the time. You know, everybody's starting to get their audio, the deluxe audio straps are starting to come in to select people. A couple of people have gotten the TP Cast wireless adapter. You know, some of this stuff has started to leak out. I don't know exactly when it's coming out retail for everybody, like regular Joes that are ordering these things. Some of them should be coming relatively soon. But the topic I had is, do you stick with this Vive headset that you have right now, and do you buy all these accessories? And basically you buy the deluxe audio strap, you make it a little bit better there. You buy the wireless, that's a huge major upgrade. Maybe you do some foveated rendering thing. Do you buy all these little accessories, or do you go in a different direction where you say, you know what, I'm going to step off to the side and maybe I'm going to jump on the LG or something and try to get a bunch of upgrades that's just packed in with a new headset. So why don't we kick it over? Steve, you haven't talked too much in a while. Go ahead and start off with that.
All right. It's something I'll take things my wife never says for 100, Alex. So like I'm sort of disappointed in the Vive and all these accessories. Not because I think all these accessories coming out, and let's be clear, it's not like HTC is making all of these things. This is a lot of third parties. It's a part of their program they have. I can't think of the name of the program right now, but they have that program where third parties can basically license the tracking technology and can make sort of sanctioned or licensed accessories. And through this program, I'm pretty sure that's how most of these accessories are coming out. But my problem with it is, it's great. Like, we got the tracking pucks. Awesome. Wireless. I go, well, wireless, that you see the benefit there. That just applies to everything. But for everything other than the wireless, the pucks, the foveated rendering, it is no software. There's nothing. Like, we have the top of the line headset. It's the most expensive headset on the market. You have the most expensive accessories. You have the most expensive controllers. If your controller breaks, you know, it's $130 for one. Everything's so expensive, and it's the best hardware. You know, if you're talking in the realm of tracking, it's top of the line, but they're not leveraging that. There's nothing that I can play on the Vive that just can't be played on the Rift. And that's the problem. They need to, other than maybe unseen diplomacy, but honestly, I've not tried it on the Rift. They need to come out and say, Steve, this is why you need to buy the tracking puck. This is why. Steve, this is why you need to buy this. This is why you need to buy that. And they're not showing it. It's you know, Tom Cruise, show me the money. Like, they're not, and that's my big problem with it. It's so hardware focused and so theoretically focused without actually putting the games out there. And maybe Valve will show us with their 3 unannounced games. Maybe they'll say, this is why you have to have a Vive. This is why this game won't work on the PlayStation VR. This is why this game won't work on the Oculus Rift. This is why you need to buy a Vive, or, you know, have a headset with, like the LG with the Lighthouse technology. They've yet to show it, and that's why I think it's a problem. And that's why, you know, if we're talking about holding, selling, or buying stock, I'm right now I am holding, or maybe even sell, and that this needs to shake out, and they need to show their cards some. Rant over.
Interesting take there. So you're kind of dodging the whole topic altogether and saying, look, I'm not doing nothing because no one's showing me any reason to do anything.
Right. I don't think that's dodging the topic, so to speak. It's dodging the issue because, you know, they have to prove it. Now, I bought VR, and the Vive was the first headset that I bought. I bought it blindly. They hadn't showed me too much, you know, because I mean, it's a hard thing to show. But I'm all in. I mean, hell, I have all 3 headsets. I'm all in. I should be the first person. I should be the easiest person to sell these accessories to, I think. And I'm not in any way excited for really any of them because they're not proven. Now, wireless, I am excited for wireless. My problem with wireless is because I have 3 headsets. I don't want to buy wireless for one, like that's, and not have it for the other 2. I'd like a universal wireless solution. Then I'll buy that in an instant. So I'm setting wireless aside, but all the other accessories, like they need to show me why I need it. They need to show some damn games. And I really think that's what, where HTC and Valve are really, you know, kind of missed the mark and have not put up what they should be.
Before we get to Gary, one little comment I'll say to what you did speak on is you kind of mentioned room scale, like this advantage that HTC has over everybody else, which that's what they do have. And if you look back here, I got this huge ass area, right, that I can play, which is awesome. I mean, I can have my own little mini holodeck here because I got a huge area. The unfortunate thing is, if you look at the Steam surveys of how much space people have, Gary, if you look at his area back there, he is the much more common person. Like he's 9 out of 10, I'm 1 out of 10. So as much as I would love some developer out there to be like, you know what, I'm going to make the most incredible kick-ass room scale game where you can walk all around and you can do this and you can do that, like Unseen Diplomacy, but take it to a whole new level with a real budget and everything and like really make it an incredible thing. Unfortunately, I don't know that we're going to see that because of how many people actually have this. A lot of people don't. But what we do get out of it is games like Vanishing Realms that weren't designed to like take full advantage of this. They just play better. So we do have that. But I do understand your point. But let's kick it over to Gary. Gary, are you buying these accessories, all of them, some of them, or are you going to sit on the sidelines? What's your take on that?
Well, first of all, I do agree that there's this software issue with certain accessories. The tracker, for example, it's part of the reason why I'm not excited about the tracker at the moment, because I haven't seen really what it can do. So I'm not going to be purchasing one of those until, like Steve says, they can give me a reason to purchase these accessories.
But you don't want to kick dinosaurs in the face in Island 359 and buy 3 trackers for that?
Yeah, exactly. That's not enough. That's not enough for me to make that purchase. But what I will say in terms of other accessories, like you can have a wireless add-on, as Steve said again, and that is something that is a good addition to the headsets that we've got at the moment. But my point that I want to make is that we could say wait for the next generation of headsets and these could all be wireless, and we could just hang on, you know, we could hang on a year and get the next generation of headsets, which probably will be wireless by then. The point is, we can wait that and not have wireless for that length of time, or we can have an accessory that can do it now. There's a few points that I want to make on that. First of all, you can save up and get this new headset, which will be a large lump sum headset. It's going to be, you know, what, £700, $800, whatever, the next generation, you know, comparing it to the Vive at the moment. You could sort of move that cost over a longer period of time and say get a wireless add-on, get some of these foveated rendering add-ons, and sort of get the the benefits now and also spreading the cost out. Now, I'm not saying that's a perfect solution to any of these things, because obviously as the next generation comes out, it's probably going to be better wirelessly than the accessory that you've bought. It's going to be an all-in-one solution, and they're going to be catering for that kind of experience. But I do think as well that the VR is moving so quickly. I've said this again and again. The technological developments of VR are moving so quickly that even if you were to wait for the next generation, you could say, I'm not going to buy any of these accessories. I want to wait. I want to hold off and get the next one. In 3 months or 4 months time after that one comes out, there's going to be a new headset that's probably going to be coming out. And I honestly believe that we're going to be accelerating the number of headsets that are coming out. As more companies get on board with VR, they're going to be constantly bringing out these new headsets, and they're constantly going to be iterating on the last one. We've seen it already. LG have jumped on board with slightly increasing what their headset can do over what the Vive can do, in very, very small terms, really, a slight increase in resolution. And I think it's difficult when you're a consumer to take a step back and think, at what point do I jump on? And at what point do I just continue adding to the cost of this original headset that it cost me? You're adding on to the original purchase price by adding all these accessories on. And it's a fine line. I don't know the answer. Personally, if an accessory makes a significant difference to me, and the wireless is the one that I'm looking at the moment, then possibly that's the one I'll jump on board with. I'd rather do it that way than to wait for the next generation. However, the price has got to be right, and this is an important point. I don't know if the wireless accessory from TPcast or any of these other ones is really getting the price right to appeal to me at the moment.
Yeah, it's a tough pickle to be in, because and then another thing you can throw into the whole equation is video cards. That's always looming in the background. You guys have 1070s, which you would think would make you at a level where you really don't have to worry about anything, but that's not exactly the case, because we do see games that continue to come out. And some people out there have 1080 Ti's, and they still have some problems with some of these games. So the video card thing is always going to be looming in the background as well. And when you think of the video card thing, think of the cost of that. That's like going to be double the cost of the wireless adapter if you buy a relatively high-end one. So that's there as well. It's a complicated issue, and this is just the industry that we find ourselves in. This is not a game for people that are very price adverse, because it's going to get expensive. If you want to stay on the cutting edge of VR, you're either going to have to add all these things as they come along, or you're going to have to continually upgrade your headset and jump on a new headset. What I will say though about the new headset idea, remember, we do have this LG that is coming later this year. We still don't know a ton about this LG. The price, what about the Vive? What about the Vive's price? Oculus had a price drop. We're talking about E3 predictions. There has to be some kind of drop at some point in the Vive price. And with LG coming into the fold, you would think they would come in and maybe be like, okay, well, we're $599 and we're including everything with it. The other thing about the LG that should not be forgotten. Now, I don't know, man. My memory on this is a little bit hazy, but here's what I thought back when the whole LG thing was unveiled, is that the LG had a cord that was coming out of the back of it, but that the cord was really thin, and that some of the people that tried the demo were kind of taken aback by how thin this little cord was, and that it was like the cord was thin and the cord was short, and then it attached to a longer cord that went farther away. And then it had like a link box and everything. And I might be misremembering this, but I thought for sure that there was an LG, like it was some interview with somebody, and the LG guy, like they asked him, they were like, this short cord, is there any chance it's going to like a wireless pack that's going to be on your belt? Because it seems like this cord is going right down to that spot. Like it would be perfect for a little wireless pack that's on your belt. And I thought that the LG guy kind of was like, like smiling like, hey, maybe so, but we're not saying it right now.
Yeah, well, that yeah, you've just made me remember actually, because I think they were using a USB-C connector, and it was just a single connector into the headset, so you didn't have a separate HDMI, separate USB. Presumably, it had power come into it in a different cable as well. But yeah, I think you're right. Actually, I do remember them saying something about this, just using a USB-C cable.
So if the LG were to come in at $599 or some, some type of discount, and then it also just comes standard with a wireless pack and also having a link box as well, although it's hard to think that it would be even lower price if it's coming in with that. But then that definitely changes the game. You have to think, do I want to buy all these add-ons? And like you were saying, Gary, you're increasing your investment in this particular headset. For me too, we're in the most uncertain thing that's going on right now, because you got these Acer headsets, Lenovo, Hewlett Packard, and these have controllers now. And then you have Windows, and we just don't know how this thing is going to shake out. You got Project Alloy there. And then we can even get into some of the AR stuff, Magic Leap. There was we didn't have this as part of our news, but there's a rumor that Magic Leap is going for another series of funding, Series D, and that its total investment value could hit $6 to $8 billion for a company that has not shown diddly squat. And Magic Leap has been going on since like what, 2012, 2013. I mean, when are they going to show something? So that might come out. We might see some Magic Leap thing that costs $2,000, but we might be like, oh shit, I'm selling my used car here because this Magic Leap thing looks so incredible. Ricky Gervais,
the magic's how they're just going to take everybody's money and run. Like, that's the ultimate magician's trick. They stood up on stage and said, here's a couple $1,000,000 in my pocket. See ya.
But you really think...
I'm not saying that's what they're going to do. I'm just saying that, like, that's... Like, they got to show something. Like, I mean, their name of their company's Magic. Like, I think that's the magic. Like, they pull the ultimate
somehow, man.
You have to be rich or a celebrity to see Magic Leap. That's the problem.
You know, the funny thing about Magic Leap though is, like, whenever Upload VR has a topic about Magic Leap, the comments are thick, man. People come into those comments and half of them are like, no, they got to have something because Google and Alibaba would not just be dropping billions of dollars for nothing. They have to have something. But then other people come in and like, Theranos, do you remember Theranos? Remember this, remember that? You know, these companies that almost turned out to be Ponzi schemes and everybody was in love with. I think Google was a huge investor in Theranos as well. So it is a 50-50 thing. But I'm just saying, this VR industry, and if you also add AR in as well, is so wide open. It's like all these, it's like the Kentucky Derby that just happened in Steve's home state. It's a wide open field. You got 20 of them. They're running down the line, and we don't know what horse is going to win, man. And it's such an uncertain thing, but it's fun to be into it.
The uncertainty lies in, right? So I firmly think that the future of VR, and I could be wrong, but I think the future is a point where VR headsets are like a monitor, right? Like, you have your computer and you have, you know, I have HP monitors, but you might have Samsung monitors, whatever. The games don't care what my mouse and keyboard is, so long that I have a mouse and keyboard or a gamepad. And I think the VR headsets will get there, where it's just, you have headset X, and headset X may have a better resolution than headset Y, and you know, you're going to have different levels. You know, the true high-end performance people, maybe they're going for the $1,200 headsets, which isn't unbelievable because there's people out there that'll pay that much for a 24-inch monitor. And then you'll have the more budget conscious people that will, you know, go for a $300 headset. I think what's really at stake here, and it really goes back to my rant on the topic, is the ecosystem. Everyone, like, you know, the Vive is tied to Steam, even though it doesn't necessarily need to be. Oculus is obviously tied to Oculus Home, although you can use it on Steam. PlayStation VR is 100% tied to the PlayStation ecosystem. And I think people are drawing these lines, and that's going to muddy though that's the source of the muddied waters that you're referring to, Anthony. Like the fact that I have to think of accessories for a specific headset that I can only play a certain subset of games on. That's the barriers that we have to figure out how to knock down. And like, I love the idea of wireless, but I'm not buying it for my Vive because I can't use it on my Rift and I can't use it on my PlayStation VR. That's a problem. Like, I don't know why TPcast hasn't just said, hey, this is a wireless HDMI transmitter that will also carry the USB data. So Steve, you can plug it in for your Rift. Steve, you can plug it in for your PlayStation VR. Well, maybe not that one because there's drivers and shit, I'm sure. So, but my point is that the issue is hardware and fragmentation in the hardware, but that doesn't need to be. I think the underlying issue is the fragmentation in the ecosystems. And, you know, Oculus catches a lot of crap because they don't officially support the Vive. But you know what? There's a game that's coming out that's exclusive to Viveport. They all want to lock us into their ecosystem. None of these people are our friends. And it's a game of ecosystems. Microsoft they're going to play the same card. And that's what we got to figure out how to knock down. The monitors and keyboards and your hard drive brand, like all that, like is agnostic to the ecosystem. We got to figure out how to get the HMDs that way.
Steve, though, you're saying, okay, we're going to get to a day where I got an LG monitor there, I got an Acer monitor here, I got a Sony HD TV or whatever, and no one cares about any of that. You don't have a podcast about freaking monitors because no one cares because we just use them. But on that Sony HD TV, I might be on PSN, which is their little private store. I might be on my Xbox private store. Private stores ain't going away. We're going to deal with that.
No, yes, I know that's always going to be a thing, but what I'm saying is you know, setting consoles aside, here's my mouse, right? My mouse is not locked to Steam. It's not locked to Oculus. It's why is my monitors aren't? I can play Steam games on here. I can buy Minecraft from the Microsoft Store and play it on this same monitor. Like, why are these headsets locked? And you know, again, Oculus gets a lot of crap for that, and maybe they are for sure the biggest culprits in it. But it's not like Steam is the innocent bystander. Yeah, they support the Rift, but it's, I don't know. That's the problem. We hear you. Honestly.
Yeah,
we hear you.
I think we need to move on. Yeah, rants. This is the rant episode. I love it. So we're gonna get into what we've been playing.
Yeah. Hey, you know what I was thinking is we've actually been going. See, this is what happens every time. We don't have any news stories, and then we start doing these topics. Next thing you know, it's freaking 2 hours later. We haven't even started what you've been playing. But one suggestion I have is maybe let's just pick one game each, and then if anybody else has played, we can also talk. And let's start off with Gary. Gary, what is your big game?
Okay, well, I'll talk about this one. I'm not going to spend a long time on it, but I'm just going to talk about it because it was such a big disappointment, and the other two guys know what I'm talking about now. This is Everspace, and this has been an early access game for quite a while, and it was a Kickstarter game originally, and it had a sort of limited VR support for a while. You could get it working through VR, but now it's got the full release, and they've added full VR support to the game and also a campaign, and I was really looking forward to this game. I love space games. I love Elite Dangerous. I love Valkyrie to a limited extent because I don't really like it just being multiplayer. I wish that game had a campaign, and in all honesty, I thought Everspace was going to be the campaign version of Valkyrie in some ways, but there's a few things with this, and the main thing is probably the controls and just the general feel of the ship itself. You don't feel like you're flying a ship in space in the way that you do in Elite Dangerous or Valkyrie. In this game, to me, it feels like you're controlling just a camera and moving it around this 3D environment. It's almost as if you're a camera in Unity and you can just move it around. It doesn't feel like the ship's got any weight or momentum to its movement at all in some ways, and it just sort of ruins the experience for me. And just full disclosure, you know, I've only played about 10-15 minutes of it because I just couldn't get past that initial impression of how poor this game feels compared to how I was expecting it to feel. And so if anybody wants to leave anything in the comments that might sway me and persuade me to maybe try this game again, then feel free to do so, because maybe there's something I'm missing. But I'm a fan of space games, and I have a preference. You know, Elite Dangerous is great, Eve Valkyrie feels great. This game just doesn't match up in that one important respect.
I gave it a go too, and I pretty much agree with you in everything you said, Gary. I'm less concerned about the camera perspective, and I think it's maybe because I played Starblood Arena, and it has I think that's a function to a degree of the 6 DOF, the 6 degrees of freedom control, and how you can manipulate the craft. I've not played Elite Dangerous, but in Eve Valkyrie, you kind of always have this forward momentum. And that forward momentum, then you just kind of steer it, so to speak. In this game, it's more like a hovercraft, and then you have to always tell it which of the 6 axes, so to speak, that you want it to travel in. So that doesn't bother me as much. Now, once you say it feels like a camera perspective, it does kind of, Oz behind the magic curtain. It does kind of spoil it in that sense. But what really bothered me with this game, and I bought it and refunded it pretty quick, was the performance. I have a GTX 1070, and there's people on Reddit that said, hey, I have a 1080 Ti, and I'm also having performance issues. And it's that's unnecessary, because I even brought a lot of the settings down to low, and the settings that they had, and the performance issues persist. So I think hopefully it's a sort of a bug, and not a fundamental underlying problem that they can't fix, and they may fix that. So that's one big issue. But the controls are also an issue that's completely unmappable, and I guess maybe you could do that with a third-party program or something, change the mapping, but the default scheme, I just didn't like it. And again, it may be because I'm coming from Starblood Arena, and I'm trained, so to speak, a certain way, and to try to do something different is like driving on the wrong side of the road when you've driven on the other side. So, so that's my take on Everspace. Anthony, you didn't play this one, did you?
No, I didn't play it. But I will say I actually have talked to a couple of people that really love it. So it's interesting to hear Gary's thoughts and then hear opposite thoughts. But I've also heard a ton of the performance thing too.
I think if the performance was right, and if I could map the control enough so that I just didn't have this fundamental navigation issue, I think I could get into it. Because one of the things that it did seem to somewhat do right is there was a little hint of a story. There was almost like this little cutscene in the very beginning, and it at least serves a purpose, which is an irrational big hang up for me. So I'm going to keep my eye on this game. Maybe I'll pick it up again in the future. But for now, it was definitely at $30. It's an expensive game. If this was a $10 game, I probably would have not refunded it. But it's a $30 game that's going right back into the refund bank until it's right.
Yeah, I want to just make it clear as well that part of my opinions, my negative opinions on this game, is coming. I'm absolutely sure are coming from the fact that I was looking forward to it so much, and it just didn't deliver on what I expected. So I'm sure there is a good game in there somewhere for some people, but for me, it just didn't push the right buttons at all.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to pick one of the other games, Dick Wilde. So I completed Farpoint, and I'm going to try to make this brief. First, I want to touch on Farpoint, because when I played it, where I was last week when we talked about it on the show is I had gotten to a point before I saw the first major boss battle. And then beyond there, of course, because I've completed the game now, and the game, I didn't give it a number or anything like that, but I'm going to try to convey where I feel about the game now, having completed it versus where I was last week. Last week I would have given the game an 8, and I'm going to give the game like a 9 now. Like, it is a very good game. It gets away. You're not just shooting the alien spiders. Like, you run into totally different backdrop, totally different settings. You get completely different weapons, and it's probably as close to a Halo game in VR as can be. And to go any further, I'd have to spoil it. it was really, it's one of the best games out there. The aim controller just gives it a level of immersion that a lot of games can't do, and is really top notch. And we talked earlier about how it cracked in at #2 in the top games in the UK on that list, and is completely deserving. If you have a PlayStation VR and you can find one of these bundles, like I do recommend it, because it shows, and I mentioned earlier that I wouldn't be surprised if they announced Battlefront 2 coming to PlayStation VR with the aim controller. I see, because after having played this, I see how it could work. How you could just straight up play the main Battlefront 2 gameplay in VR with this controller. It's totally a thing that could happen. So big thumbs up there. But because I liked Farpoint and because I was having a lot of fun with the aim controller, I bought Dick Wilde on the PlayStation VR. And because I just wanted to use the aim controller some more. And it's a wave shooter. It's actually been out for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, something like that, on the HTC Vive and the Oculus. But it's a cartoony, it's a fun take on a wave shooter. We always kind of joke around that we have, wave shooter 267 just came out, but this one's a little different, just like Brookhaven's a little different, and just like Space Pirate Trainer's a little different. What's going on here is you're sort of standing on this raft or this platform in front of a lake, and you've been hired to clear the lake of any vermin, or and all sorts of alligators and fish and birds and turtles and electric eels, and I don't know how all these creatures got into this lake. It's not a lake I've ever heard of, but you just stay on this platform and you have an array of weapons, and you just shoot them, and you clear wave after wave after wave, and at the end of each wave is sort of a boss like battle, and then you can move on to other areas. So it's a very simple game. I think it's $15 is what I paid for it. And again, I got it on the PlayStation VR because I wanted that continuity with the aim controller. After I got it on PlayStation VR, I messaged the developer and say, hey, my co-host would like to try this game out, and they gave us a key for the HTC Vive and the Oculus Rift on Steam. And I played it there, and it's the same. The gameplay continues. It all operates the same way. Obviously it looks a little better because you have the PC power behind it. But one downfall is that it doesn't have the aim controller. I think it's still a fun game, but the aim controller gives it another sense of fun. I think it's another sort of dimension to it. So that's a game I'm playing, and I recommend. I mean, $15 isn't that much, and if you don't have 47 wave shooters like I do, and maybe you only have a couple, this is one that you can put in your wave shooter arsenal.
Is it $15 on Steam too?
I assume so.
Thought it was 20, but I might be off. But I tried this Dick Wilde on the Steam one that we got, tried it out, and I was mildly impressed with it. I mean, of course, it's another wave shooter. We've seen it done a million times. We know exactly how it works. What I will say, though, is if you liked Zombie Training Simulator, I liked this one a little bit better because, see, here's the thing. Okay, so the graphics are clean and crisp, just like Zombie Training Simulator. The downside of having such clean and crisp graphics, though, is you do notice screen door a little bit more because everything is so refined that it becomes a little bit more obvious, especially with bright colors and stuff like that. But it really looks great. It has a really good look to it. And the stuff that's coming at you, man, it'll make you dive and move around, well, the room scale on PSVR, they probably don't want you moving around quite as much. But the other thing I saw with it too is you can, like, after a wave is over, you can kind of choose like to have a turret or to have mines in the water, or you can choose like a health upgrade that'll re-upgrade your health. So it kind of gives you almost a little bit of a tower defense strategy type of thing that kind of is added in there. But I thought it's a unique, cool little game. And this is what I'll say about it. I was expecting it to be pretty lame, and I was pleasantly surprised. But I went in with lowered expectations.
I will say on the PlayStation VR version, I move around just as much, and because it's front facing, it's not like I'm moving around and turning 360 degrees. Because it's front facing, and also playing with the aim controller, you only get to to choose the assault rifle type weapons. You could choose the nail gun, I think they just call it rifle, the grenade launcher, and by it being a two-handed weapon, you can't dual wield like you can when you're playing with the Move controllers and on the Vive and on the Rift, where you can get a shield and like a shotgun or something. So by a function of that, you move around a lot more because you can't just throw a shield over your head to protect you from all the birds pooping on you and the fish throwing their little spitball things at you. So I actually moved around more on the PlayStation version. Like, I got sweaty playing this game.
Yeah, I was pretty impressed with it as well, actually, because I wasn't like you, Anthony. I wasn't expecting a lot from it. But one thing I will say is it's really tough. I didn't do too well in it, if I'm being honest, but it's a good game, and some of the graphics, especially in like the hub area where you select your level, they're a little bit reminiscent of something like Job Simulator. They've got that kind of aesthetic to them in places. When you get into the level, I'd probably say less so. The enemies look a little bit different than to what you're probably used to in something like Job Simulator, but overall, yeah, a pretty impressive game, really.
Yeah, so one game actually, I just want to mention two games real quick, and then we can check out of here. But
he sets the early. He's like, let's talk about one game, and then he's like, well, I'm going to talk about two.
Well, I was hoping one of you guys might mention one of these other ones, but that you went in other directions. But the two games that I'm going to mention, they're free right now, which sucks for you guys because you're going to see this on Monday, I guess, or whenever we put it up, and you might only have like 2 hours left or what. I don't know how long these free weekends are going for these games. But the two games I'm going to talk about, Racket NX and Blazerush. I just want to talk about Racket NX real quick, and then I'll get to Blazerush. So the Racket NX thing, you guys might remember that I was like super into the Racket NX demo like a long time ago. Like, I raved about it on like the Vivecast and stuff like that. Then the full version of Racket NX came out. I played it that first day, and I was actually super disappointed. I was super disappointed because what I thought was this only has a tiny bit more than what the demo provides. And I didn't like the value proposition of it. I was like, you know what? The demo has 85% of what you're delivering with this. This extra 15% ain't worth $20. I'll just play the demo, even though, I mean, you guys provided a great game. It's an incredible game, but I'll just play the demo. That was kind of my take. But you know what? I will fully admit my mistake, because playing in this free weekend, I had an incredible experience. I was in the multiplayer, and it was really like this dude was like 5 feet away from me. His voice was crystal clear. It was like he was standing in the room with me, and I was playing a multiplayer game with this guy, and it worked absolutely perfectly. And the way it worked is, you kind of take turns. So, you hit a shot, you try to get as many points as you can, and then it's the other person's turn to hit a shot. But it can be kind of difficult because you're both standing in this arena and you're kind of 5 feet away from each other, and the ball goes over your head, it goes this way, you lose track of where the hell the ball is. But oh my God, man, it was just so fun. It worked so smooth. Me and this dude had a great time. We were talking to each other, and we were both like, wow, this is working so well. And then the other cool thing is, remember how I said I wish there were like different arenas, different colored arenas, and like all they have is this like yellowish, orangish look. Like, give us something different. Well, in the multiplayer, because the last time I never got into multiplayer, it never worked. But in this multiplayer, there's like this different colored walls and stuff in certain parts of the area of the multiplayer. I had a blast, man. And then I have to go back to the sound effects. I had my sound turned up really loud, and one Hamza absolutely nailed the sound design on this. The voiceovers are a little cheesy, and I still feel they are, but the sound effects of your Racket and everything, it just gives you that feel, man, puts you in there. Real quick, did either of you guys want to comment at all on Racket NX?
I'll just quickly say that, yeah, I tried multiplayer originally when it was at the start of the weekend. I couldn't get in a match, but then I tried it again last night. And for me, that revolutionizes this game. Multiplayer makes this game. I really think that the multiplayer in this is better than in a lot of other things that I play quite often. like a table tennis game, for example, 11 table tennis VR. This game relies on multiplayer, I think, and the solo is good. You know, you get a good feel for the ball and everything, but when you get into a good match with somebody, and you know, maybe it's reliant a little bit on the people that you're playing as well. But I was lucky; I got in with a good guy, and we were having great fun in there. I loved it. I think the multiplayer is fantastic.
Yeah, the thing I was thinking when I was with that one guy too is that I was thinking, man, how cool would this be if that was Steve or Gary and we could have such a natural conversation that sounded so good and we're in a fun game at the same time.
Yeah, I gave it a go
Steve?
too, and I really like Racket NX. I liked it in its demo. It felt very just very good, and it feels even better now. I like the little, I don't know when they added it, but I like the little indicator on the ground that lets you know what your rotations are, to kind of help you keep you from getting your cord all wrapped up. It's just a lot of little attention to detail, and the game just runs flawlessly. Like I feel no like reprojection. It just seems like it's just running perfect, and there's really not anything bad at this point to say about this game. I think they made a smart decision giving it a free play weekend, because you know we had all kind of written it off after the early access version 1 or whatever they call it came out, and it was basically the demo with maybe a few little tweaks. So Racket NX gets a big thumb up for me. The problem that I have though is that for whatever reasons, I suck at it. I can't figure out how to, it just seems like it's a little, the difficulty is a little too much. I can't, I haven't tried multiplayer, and it's because I suck so much. I can't really complete any of the main levels without just running out of time, because I can't, you know, I can get volleys going. So it's not like I'm missing my swings or anything like that, but I can't aim it and hit the little green places that you need to hit in the same amount of time. So I need to get good, I know, and I'd like to check out the multiplayer.
One thing I will say is that this is one game that would directly benefit from wireless HMD. That's for sure.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, so we've been running a hell of a long time, but I'm sorry we cannot end the show quite yet, because I have to talk just for a second about Blazerush.
No, it's good, because I'm with you.
What's that?
I said I'm with you. I like this one too. Go ahead.
Cool. So working on VR game rankings, I had to like try to come up with, you know, lists of like all the games that are out there. And so I'm making all these game profile pages. So I'm going through all these Oculus games that launched a long time ago. And when I got to Blazerush and I was working on that game profile page and I was looking at the screenshots and stuff, I was like, this thing looks hella cool. And I remember way back to when the Rift first came out, everybody was talking about Blazerush, like Blazerush is really cool and stuff. And I just had totally forgotten about it, right? And so we hear about this free weekend, and I thought, this is a perfect opportunity to check this out. So loaded it up. And this is a sit-down game with a controller. And I know there's people out there. In fact, I was talking to a guy recently who was like, oh, man, third-person controller games. It's like, God, you guys are missing out, man, because this is just so cool. The thing that I love about this game is it's basically like you're sitting, it's like you're sitting down at your kitchen table, and your kitchen table has this really cool track that's on it, and you can kind of lean over and get closer to it, and you know, it's kind of going around by you and stuff, and you have these little like Matchbox cars that are just zooming along, and you see the smoke and you see the little destruction and the stuff that happens to them, and they flip over, and the control is hard to deal with, and Gary's going to get into that. But I don't know, man. I love this type of shit. I think the people that they throw away third person, they throw away controller games, and they want nothing to. I understand the theory. This is VR. We want to be immersed. You want to feel like you're in the world and like you're holding the sword and you're there. But if you guys are throwing away all this third person stuff, you're missing the point, man, because just seeing stuff like Blazerush and Chronos and things like that, the thing that pops into my head is Madden, NBA 2K, FIFA. This is how you do these flat games that would be too hard to like try to totally immerse you in the world. But what you can do is you lay the game out so it's laying there on the table, and you're like this god, this giant god that's looking in on the world, and you're holding your controller and you're playing this game and you're seeing all the stuff happen. They could do this with GTA, with everything. I mean, it's going to be hard to make it run at a decent level and stuff, but To me, this third-person controller stuff, this is the way you bring all those flat games to VR, and I would freaking eat this shit up. I would love it. But let's kick it over to Gary, because Gary, you did have some control problems. So
yeah, I mean, I've looked at this game for a long time and I've always wanted to play this game, and it's very cheap. I don't know why I haven't picked it up before, but you know, it had a free weekend this weekend, so I thought I'd give it a try. And you know, if I could get past this small issue that I have with the controls, with the control system, I think I'd love the game. I honestly do, because it's exactly the kind of game I want to play. The only problem I have is that you don't use a button to accelerate. You're basically just pushing the stick in the direction you want to go, and it doesn't feel good to me. And not only that, I find it's just, I don't even know really how to explain it, but it just doesn't feel right. The game doesn't feel right. And I can understand there are some gameplay reasons they've set the control system up like that. So I can understand that they had to do it for this game. But for me, if I want to play one of these games, you know, like going back, we've had these types of games for years and years. And going back, you know, when we used to play on monitors and on TVs, going back to those types of games, they have a button to accelerate and then you move it around as if you're controlling a radio controlled car, for example. It operates in the same way, and that's really how I want to play these games. And I'm sort of annoyed at myself really that I can't get past this control.
Did you look in the options? Were there any control settings?
No, well, as far as I can see, it won't let you change any of the bindings at all on the gamepad. Now, I've posted actually on Reddit on a thread that was talking about this game just to see if anyone knows of a way to change it without using some third-party application or anything. But no, there doesn't seem to be, and it's set up in this way, I would imagine, due to gameplay limitations. It has to be like this. But okay. I mean, I don't know that for certain, but yeah, I couldn't see any options.
No, I liked the game. I didn't have any issues with the controls, so you know, but I also didn't think about it, so I guess I didn't have any issues with the controls. But I think if I could choose, I would want to control it the way you want to, Gary. You know, but that aside, I think it's a fantastic pickup for $5. It's on sale for $5 now. Maybe not by the time you guys hear this podcast, but I think it's $10 normal price, and it's a lot of fun. And it looks like it's a deep game too. And like when I was playing it, I was thinking, how cool would it be to have local multiplayer where even though I'm wearing VR mask, my son's in the same room with me, maybe on the other side of the quote unquote table that's sort of presented to you. And we're able to just talk, you know, not through a microphone and a headset, but just able to straight up just talk to each other as if this racetrack is, you know, on the hollow deck in front of us. And I just thought it's really well done, and I love this third person stuff. I gobble it up, and it's no less virtual reality to me. You know, this idea that virtual reality is necessitated by first person is kind of silly. It seems to suggest that as a first person, you've not sat down and ever played with a train track or played with any sort of toy as a kid that kind of represented the same physical space. Like, it is still first person. You're that person looking down at the playset. You're that person looking down at the sandbox. And I think it's quite fantastic. I really don't have anything bad to say. And if it was a $40 game, you know, I'd maybe have to start questioning some value. But at $10 and $5 on sale, it's can't say anything bad.
The cool thing about it too is it's one of these kind of games where you can get a quick burst of entertainment, you know, because we have a lot of these VR games where it's like, okay, I'm going in, you know, if I'm going to play Wilson's Heart, for example, I need to think, okay, I got to give an hour and a half to this game. You know, this game, I got to be into it. I got to get into the vibe of it and stuff like this. I love to have little things like this where it's like, I can get 15 minutes of fun out of this, you know, which is beautiful. But Gary, I just want to say one thing on the controls. So the first time I was playing it, I freaking hated it for like 20 minutes. Exactly what Gary was talking about. I'm like, why are they making you do this? Why can't I just hit the trigger for my gas and control it in a different way? This is bothering me. I keep spinning in circles. I can't freaking control it. Okay, now what I did figure out, and Gary, I want you to try this before this free weekend is over. Or, well, I mean, buy the game anyway. It's $5. But what I did figure out in playing it is that you have this little arrow that follows around your car, And you really want to pay attention to that arrow when you're pushing it. So don't push forward unless the arrow is in that direction that you want it to go. And you'll eventually get used to it. And the thing is, I think what they did with these controls is they have a lot of different modes in this game. It's not just the one race thing that you've seen. There's other modes where there's like this gigantic tractor thing that is chasing you guys, and you're trying to race away from a monster basically that is coming after you. And if you go too slow, this thing catches up to you and it smashes anything in its path. And when you're playing that game, you know what's super sweet about that is if you look really, like if you get down close and you look at this thing that is moving around, it is one of those things where your brain is like, this does not compute. I'm seeing this thing so close that is doing this crazy shit. It's like a hologram or something. It's really cool. But the other thing too is the multiplayer. I was able to get far enough in some of these little single player things that it opened up the multiplayer chain. And so then I went up there, and it's like Blaze Ball or whatever is what they call it. And it's, you have this little football and you're on a field and there's a team, you know, there's two teams. It's kind of like Rocket League basically. And you're going after this football and it's like whoever can get a hold of the ball, and then you're trying to get it into the goal and you score a touchdown. But it's easier said than done because everybody else is ramming you, slamming you, shooting missiles at you, shooting machine gun fire at you. So you only get a hold of this ball for like fractions of a second. And to go back to the control thing, when you're playing multiplayer, the absolute key to it is the position of your wheels, like where your wheels are turned and your inertia and how much what you'll learn in this game. Like for somebody that gets really good at multiplayer, what they're going to learn is they're going to learn the inertia. They're going to learn exactly which angle to have your wheels tilted. So because it's always like you're over moving and you have to come back and get the ball. It's hard to explain, but there is a reason they did this control mechanism. And Gary, try it out again and just look at the arrow and just know that you only want to push forward when that arrow is in that right direction, and you might get a little bit better feel for it.
Yeah, I'll give it a go. I'll stick with it. So I know that I will like the game if I can just get past this one issue that I have with it. I know I will like it.
I hated the first 20 minutes, and then I finally wrapped my head around it, and I'm like, oh, okay, now I was spinning in circles. My car was, I couldn't even freaking finish a race. So.
Okay, well, I believe that's going to do it for episode 37 of VR Roundtable. You know what? You guys are smart. You all have VR headsets, so I know you're some of the smartest people in the world, so I'm not going to tell you where to find our stuff. We're on Twitter. We're on Facebook. You can find us, and we'll see you next time.
I'm not going to tell you, but I'm going to tell you.
No, I'm just saying I'm not going to go at blah, 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 you know. So see you guys next time.
Cheers, guys. Bye.
Take it easy, bros.